like the manufacturing process, what type of product that you are going to be manufactured, and the technique of the employed, okay, which type of technique that to be employed in the productions process. Then plant equipment characteristics are there. And the next, the two factors that affect the, routing procedure is to be that availability of the plant and equipments. And in the same pattern, the last one we discussed in the last class, that is called the difficulties in routing due to the non-availability of required skilled manpower are there. Because skilled manpower that leads to high degree of impact in the productions process. So therefore, these are the major factors that are affecting the term what is called as the routing. Now, after completing the term routing, we move to the scheduling. Okay, let me share my slide to you people. Thereafter, we have to discuss about it. So, screen share, schedule is there, right? Straight. Okay, I think it is visible to you people.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's right. Now, to maximize it and then proceed. That's right. Now, after knowing the term, what is called the routing, move to the next concept that is called the scheduling. Now, what is the purpose? Actually, the main purpose behind this particular, scheduling is that the preparing the operations on the time basis, okay? Because that to be exercised in the better control over the entire productions process. Schedules are to be immense importance as far as the timing and the availability of adequate resources are to be concerned. That means while you converting, the raw material into the finished product, the process to be takes place, we make some sort of routing part. After routing, we take the case of the settling. In this case, what you find, the timing is the important because on time, if the raw material is not available, then you have to face the problem. Adequate amount of the raw material must be there in your stock because we know per day how many raw material to be consumed. And if the some common, problems that we occur, how to handle those common problem with the spare parts and so on. So therefore, the most and again the most important terms, the output, which is going to be reach the market at a specific time. Because if there is a peak time period and the demand is peak, so you have to provide the adequate amount of your, product in the market. If it is not so, then we have to face the problem. So therefore, the scheduling it is very, very important as far as the timing and the ability of the adequate resources are to be there, to converting the raw materials into the final product. Now, what is the major objective behind the term, what is called as the schedules? So obviously, as we discussed here right now, that is the mid and the due date. Due date in the sense, suppose you have to order certain things and you know that particular order must have to be reached on and before of a particular date or time period. So that is the due date. Then when the order it be going to be reached to you, that is the due date. Then so the minimum work in progress in the inventory, because what is the terms minimize the work in progress in the inventory? Minimize in the sense it is not necessarily huge amount of the things to be put inside the inventory. If you put huge amount of things, then it will be your carrying cost to be increases. Again, in order to minimize the cost of the transportation, you also will take into account the purchase the huge a lot. But that lot size purchase also will create a problem because you have to put inside the inventory that also be carrying the carrying cost. So our target is to be minimize the work in progress inside the inventory. Less amount has to be there. We always kept inside the inventory, which it we treated as the work in progress that had to be minimized. Minimize the average flow time through the system. That means the flow of your resources from one department to the another department. While you movement from one to other, then it also kills some sort of time. But our target is to be minimize that average flow time from department to department. Then next objective is to be provide the high maintenance I mean, the workers' time utilizations, that is, the minimize the idle time. Because the resources, what you have to utilize in our productions process, we try to minimize its utilization. Means idle time must have to be minimized. Utilization rate increases, but idle time could be minimized. Then reduce the setup cost, because if the setup cost it will increases, if the timing in the setup in the installing on a particular devices, it will kill more time, then the cost also increases. Therefore, our target to reduce the setup cost so as to make our schedule to be perfect one. Minimize the productions and the worker cost, because the cost of production to be minimized if and only if we produce more at the less cost. With a less time period, try to produce more and more. Thereby, the cost of productions per unit must be reduces. Then the worker cost, the if you utilize the efficient labor instead of your untrained labor, right, we have to use the trained labor, trained manpowers. Because the trained manpowers, they take into account the less time to manufacturing the product. If it is the untrained labor to be there, to first of all, you have to know the untrained labor must be learn fast. Okay. Thereafter, after the training, they have to be entered into the production process, but that kills some time. If that kills some time, it also will increase the cost of the productions. Therefore, our target is to be the minimize the production cost as well as the worker, the labor force what we utilize in the production process, that to be cost less. Considerations of the due date and the avoiding the delay in the completions of a particular job. If the resources are not available and it is not sufficient inside the inventory, then we have to find in the delay in the completion of a particular job or the product or the project. So therefore, we try to, we have to take the first case when it is going to be the what is the due date and what is the availability of time, and how this availability of the time to be perfectly utilized to minimize you have to meet the demand on time. Then taking care of the the put in time. That means the throughput time to minimize the time or the job spent in the system. That means time spent inside the system. Okay, time spent inside the system in the sense how many time to require into executing that particular task. Let's say you have to try to manufacturing one electric bulb. So electric bulb passes through the different components, right? But the point is that if we try to increase the rate of the productions, obviously the cycle time to be reduces. Because our target is to be the minimize the time that we the spent inside the system to producing or manufacturing a particular product. So intention is this very clear, that is to minimize the cycle time, maximize your output. Then after knowing the term, what is the meaning of the schedule? Right now, what are the most important principles of this process, scheduling process? Most of time, scheduling is done in view of the following principles. What are they? Schedule jobs in continuation. That means the content here, what you find the continuations in the sense is the make the work in a systematic. It should be in a systematic order. That means we have to try to minimize the idle time. That means the jobletness that should be minimized. Because if they're reducing the idle time, that is our most important principles of the scheduling process. Then after starting a job, finish it as quick as possible. Because if you start a particular task, the intentions of the producer to finalize the task. You have to finish it. It is not so if you make the half finish, then again it will increases the cost of the productions. Let's say, for example, suppose if you take a simple project like a constructions of a national highway from one point to another point. then if it is not completed within the time frame, then the cost of that particular creation, that particular project also further increases. So therefore, we try to minimize the time period. I mean, we have to deliver the product on scheduled date. If we do that, then it is very simple. It will be cost less and on time it will reduce. I mean, on time you have to delivering it. And the next important principles of your scheduling process is to be finding it out where the bottleneck to be exist and try to minimize those bottlenecks. Where the real time feedback and the real time adjustment is a very, very essential in order to minimizing the cost of the productions. Because if you find certain feedback about a particular product or the services, and we can rectify that sort of things. If you find some defaults are there, some problem to be occur in the production process or the manufacturing process, then in that case, what you find, you try to minimize the problem in the very moment. So which not be lead to a cumulative of a problem to be there in future. So real-time feedback and the real-time adjustment is essential for the purpose of the scheduling. Knowledge of capacity of machines and the workers. Because the workers must have to know what to do, what they are doing, right? What type of tasks they are to be assigned, and when you to be executing the tasks, and when the task going to be delivered. So those things must have to be clearly understood by the workers, as well as the machines also. Machines, there are certain machines are there which will be utilized for the certain, the purposes are there, but there may be some machines which will be utilized multiple purposes. So if we utilize in the multiple purposes, then we find there is a large number of bottleneck to be takes place in the production process. So you try to minimizing that part of the bottlenecks. You have to adjust the time period so that you can, minimize the bottleneck and quick flow of the work to be take place. Knowledge of the capacity of the machine of the workers is be essential because they have to know what to do, what they are to be assigned for. Then continuous enhancement of the product and the focus. That is, a continuous monitoring is required because if a progress report is there, if you find certain progress it will take place, and what is the progress report? If you find some problems inside the progress report, try to minimizing at the very moment, not to, delay in the taking the decisions, right? So it is a continuous enhancement of the product as well as the process to minimize all kind of problems and to minimize the time period and the cost of the productions. Then what are the approaches to achieving the scheduling process? There are mainly two types of approaches that we take place, which are to be commonly used in the production or the manufacturing systems, such as forward scheduling and backward scheduling. Now come down to the explain the term, what is the meaning of your forward scheduling? Actually, forward scheduling means it is the scheduler schedules all the activities the forward in time. Forward in the time in the sense that means in the move ahead, not back, move ahead. And prior to manufacturing the product, all the schedule to be expressed. That means the jobs are given at the earliest available time slot in the operations, and usually the excessive, that means WIP results. The WIP in the sense that means we have to considering the term when we have to get the time period and when we have to receiving. The point to be here, let's say, back to the scheduler time period. While you make the time, in the case of your timing frame of a particular product or the service, we know while you're starting a particular time, we have to finishing it. But what is the actual time? What is the normal time to be there? If we find it to be increases, then we face some sort of problem to be there. So that means we take into account the reducing the bottleneck again in the both case of your forward as well the backward directions, because the jobs are to be while you're assigning the job to the of a specific task ahead of the schedule. Suppose, let's say, for example, tomorrow there is certain work to be takes place. Today we have to assign that one and test it whether it will occur perfectly or not so. So that means we have to think ahead beyond the thing. I mean, beyond a specific time period. So what you find that in that particular case, you can achieving your target, minimize the time and minimizing the cost of your operations. In the same way, if you move to the term what is called as the backward scheduling process. So in backward scheduling process, the scheduler that begins with the planned date and moves backward in time. Suppose my target is to be, let's say, constructing a particular building. If you construct a particular building, then we may take into account, let's say, which particular plot is there and in which way the architecture provide, I mean, different type of planning, to construct a building, right? So those things is there. But the point is that you make a flow chart from the starting to the finishing point. Okay. That means suppose we have to start a particular I mean producing the building or the that is called the project we take into account, that is called the building, constructing a particular building, like a different type of activities we take into account, such as your extracting the informations from the architecture. Then you take the case of the vastu. Then we have to take into account the digging your that is called as the I mean excavators are to be taken into account. Thereafter, the foundation work to be takes place. After foundations, then we have to take into account the pillars are there. Then after creating the pillar, then we make the term what is called as the term the roof of it, right? Uh, these are the things that to be required, right? And how much time they take into account each and every phase, right? So that we have to take, because work in progress is a very very essential part. Like in case of your previous case, that is called the usually excessive work in progress. That means WIP, that tells you the what is the work in progress with it. Work in progress means if you constructing the building, then what is the phases are there after the phasing it, the and when you are going to be completing it. That is the forward direction. Backward direction in the sense, we take the case, suppose the time 30 days we are to completing a particular building, then backward you have to study, okay, this is the time period where I mean, for last time, how many time it will be taken into account, and the back way, one by one step, we have to backward terms. That is called the backward procedure, the understanding the concept, and forward procedure of the understanding the concept. So the backward scheduling, the scheduler begins with the planned date and moves backward with our time to be zero or not. So we're back to the term what is called the CPM and POT. That means your project network diagram, like your AON or AOC, that means activity on node and activity on your arc. So we find the term the earliest starting time period and the earliest finishing period, the latest time and latest finishing time period. So you have to finding the terms of slack to be zero. But the deviation between them terms to be both head slack and tail slack, they have to be terms to be zero. Then we can find, yes, the forward direction time period and the backward direction time period is the perfect, and that is the critical path. So that the concept here, the while you make the schedule, we take the case of the term have forward as well the backward. We start with the due date and walk backward through the operations and reviewing the lead time. Because the float, we know the terms of what is called the float. That float must have to be checked whether that float is zero or not so. If there exists a certain amount of the float, then we try to reducing the float so as to make the path to be critical. So that's the case of the sibling of your forward and backward. The less work in progress, but it must have to be accurate in the lead time. So accurate in the lead time means we have to take the flow in such a manner, the forward direction as the backward direction, that slacks must be zero. If the slack is positive or the negative, never to be expressed. If it is positive, then problem is occur. That means there exists some amount of floats are there. So we take the case both forward as well the backward to understand the concept, the seedling process. Now, after knowing the term, the concept of your that is called the schedule. Now move to the what is the force of control. In flows of control, we take the term what is called the loading, same loading, dispatching, and so on. Assigning the job to be that. The loading means in the assignment, specifically the assignment. Assignment in the sense which particular machine to be assigned which particular task. Okay. Or which particular person can handle a particular task. That is called the assigning or the loading. I mean, how if, which particular machine can load up to what extent, like that. So loading is concerned with the assigning a job to the work centers and corresponding to the various machines in the work centers are there. Because inside the work center, there are the large number of machineries are there. But which machine must be operated by which particular person? And which machine must be provided to which particular task? That's the concept of the loading. Then, so the approaches to the loading work centers is that it may be the finite loading, it may be the infinite loading. Finite loading, like let for example, if you take the case of what is the load of a particular school, college, in that case, that the number of seat to be allocated. Let's say in case of the hospital, then in that case we take into account how many beds are there, right? That is its capacity. So, and on the basis of that capacity, we have to assign the term how many patients to the corresponding, beds are there. In the same manner, in a particular school or the college, if the 120 to be intake capacity, then we have to take the case there is a finite number of students can enter into. It is not so the infinite number of students can enter into. But if you take into account any kind of job mela or something else with that, in that case, there is the infinite loading. I mean, the huge amount of students may be, the unemployed person can be rushed to find the new jobs are there. That is the infinite loading. Similarly, in case of your hospital, suppose nearby some accident to be takes place, then in that case, huge amount of patient can rush to that particular hospital. Then in that case, that is called the infinite loading. So infinite loading is the infinite loading of the jobs are assigned to the work center without considering the capacity of the work center. What I say right now, accident to be takes place. If the capacity of the hospital is to be 20, seats are there, but let's the 200 patient to enter into. Then in that case is the infinite loading. Means infinite loading of the job are assigned to the work center without considering the capacity of the work center. 20 is the capacity of the work center, 20 is the capacity of that particular hospital, but 200 patient we enter into. That is the infinite loading. Similarly, finite loading means the finite loading eliminates the actual start and the stop time of each job at each work center. Means suppose there are 5 machines are there, exactly 5 number of persons can assign to it that 5 machines, right? If it is the 2 shift, then mean 10 machines, 5 machines, but 10 persons are there. If the 2 shifts are there, multiple shifts will take into account. So that means in that case, the finite number of loadings. Okay. So the loading, it can be finite, it can be infinite one. Then come to the assignment. How you have to audit, how the loading to be calculated, in which way to the assign a particular machine to a particular persons or a task to a particular machine. Actually, that process to be takes place on the basis of a method, what is called the Hungarian method. You people may be come across the term, what is the meaning of the Hungarian method, but we have to explain the concept with the help of some numerical examples. So it is a method the allocating the organizational resources, that means the task to a machine or job to a particular person or something else. So the assignment method involves the assigning the tasks or the job to the resources, means machine or manpower, like that. Why it is so? Because we take into account to avoid the sub-activity. Sub-activities in the sense, that means, let's say, suppose a carpenter doing a particular part of a particular job. So it is not so the whole task to be undertaken by a particular carpenter. It is just sub part of the whole bit. Okay. So in order to avoiding that part, completely a particular task to be provided to be a particular carpenter, so the entire thing can be undertaken by him. So that means here the sub activities to be reduces if you assigning a task. Suppose in a particular in a college or those management institutions, there is a particular module to be there. That module to be, a paper, that particular paper having the 4 module. It is not so that entire either the entire task, entire subject to be assigned to a particular person. That is one type. Or in the other way, there are the four modules are there, four modules to be assigned to the four different persons are there. So if you're doing that, that is called the sub activities that we created. But right now, in case of the loading, I mean the assigning the things, in that case, we try to avoiding that sub activities process. Then organizing the workload capacity balance. Now, after knowing the term, what is the assigning or the loading, after that, our task is to be that in such a manner, we have to, assigning the things so that the no one can be overloaded or to be underloaded to it. That means perfectly your capacity workload balance to be taken into account. Then after that, what is the objective of this particular assignment method? To minimize the total time, the total cost of the productions process. That is the intention behind of the term what is called the assignment or the loading. Minimize the total cost of the production or minimize the time that required to manufacturing the product. The characteristics of the assignment methods are to be like that. Just one job to be or the one particular work it to be assigned to one particular machine. That means a particular machine can handle more than one task. Like one person assign a particular one task or one job. So one person can't obtain or can accept more than one job. So multiple multitasking person are not required here in case of a loading or in case of a assignment because it is a super specialization required to perfectly manufacturing the product on time delivery without any kind of problems. So it is used to the production allocations. Then now the how we are to assigning it. So the this particular term to assign its systematic method. That method to be known as to be developed by the Hungarian and the famous mathematicians. He developed it. It is called as the Hungarian method. It is a combination of the optimization algorithm that solve the assignment method, the assignment model, the problem in a polynomial time. Polynomial means we take into account it is numerical. It is not a quadratic, rather it is not a linear, rather the polynomial comes. In the there is a polynomial time and which anticipated later the primal dual method. Primal dual, if you back to your simplex algorithm process of your optimizations problem, in that case, we can come across the term what is called the primal and dual. The given problem is to be treated as the primal, the mirror image of that problem is to be treated as the dual of it. Okay. So still then, our intention is to be know the term what is called the assignment method with the help of your Hungarian process. Now, let's say we take into account a particular, just a minute, a particular problem, right? That problem to be here, and we try to, solving this particular problem. Let's say, first of all, read the problem, what the problem stands for. In this case, the problem is to be that a Kaka Limited company that want to start the year with the following project. So as in the wheels, then airbag, then you take the case of the light, take the case of a looking, and so on. So one of the lower optimal cost, the opportunity cost means the minimum cost, right? So we take into account the what are the models we take in the wheel we take into account, or airbag we take into account, and the lights we have to take. And that the different workers are there, to installing the things, the wheel in the model. The first worker take the 30 hours, second 15 hours, third worker take into account 10 hours. Similarly, to installing the airbag in the model, the worker one takes 35 hours to 20 and third worker takes 13 hours. Similarly, light are going to be assigned, light, fixing the light in the car, it will be the first worker takes 25 hours, second worker takes 19 hours, third worker takes, 11 hours. In all the cases, we find third worker to be the efficient, but it is not so that third worker do all the work to be that. So right now, each task to be assigned a specific worker. In such a way, we have to assigning it so as to minimize the time and minimize the cost of operations also. Now, this Kakaka Limited company want to start the year with the following projects. assigning wheel, airbag, lights to the worker 1 to 3, taking into account the time spent in each sectors, then looking into the lower opportunity cost. Because if you take into account, let's say the wheel, the why the wheel it be assigned to the term what is called the worker 1, it is not necessary because the wheel to be assigned definitely to the worker 3. Similarly, as the worker 3 already occupied the wheel, I mean fixing the wheel, no way the worker 3 to be assigned the task what is called the airbag or the light. But we have to considering these two things, worker 2 can be assigned to the term this one. Because airbag, if it is assigned to the worker 1, it take into account 35 hours. No doubt the airbag can be assigned by the worker 3, which takes the less than other 2. But that particular worker already assigned a particular task that is called the wheel. So considering these things, okay, which is the next best alternative we have to assign so that we can optimize our time period and we're reaching our goal. But what is the process? Now the different techniques are there. The Hungarian method is without assignment. There are the certain steps we have to follow. Right now, let into account those steps to minimize, I mean, obtain the solution of the problem. Let's start with it. Write down this particular term in a particular paper. You can obtain. Just a minute. I can take my pen if it is there. Yes, it is there. So I don't know whether it is working or not. So, hey, Baba. Uh, the color combination. Yes, and that will be that. Okay. Okay. So let's say I assign to be here. Not I guess. I guess I just a minute. I will try to walk in my pen if it is possible. But it's not working. Okay. Yes. Okay. So try to write down the if you take a particular sheet, and in that case only the time you have to write. Let's say the 30, 35, and these things you have to write it down. And what is the first phase? The first phase is to be is that row reduction. Row reduction in the sense to pick the minimum time period. Let's say in the first row, which is the minimum time 25. This 25 it will be deducted from all the three. That means the while you're deducting it, we find a term what is called as the term. Let's say the 30 minus 20, 25 minus 30, which is the outcome. It will be 5, right? We take the case that is called the 5, and second one it will be 10, okay, and next one it will be let's say 0. Okay, so that is the way we have to putting it. And while you're putting all these, we prepare a next table that is called like this way. The table to be like this pattern. It's not working. Speed is not working. Hmm. Anyone strange? Okay. Why not working? What is the problem? Okay. Okay. So someone I think tried operating the screen. I think so. So it is not possible for, huh? Okay. So that means what we take into account, this is the given table. If you back to this 30, 25, 25, and so on, 10, 13, and this, if you're moving to the next slide, those things to be here. In the first row, we find that is called the 25 is the minimum, subtract that from other things, but you find 5, 10, and 0. In the same pattern, the next row, minimum it to be 15, subtract it from all the second row, we find 15 minus 15 is 0, 20 minus 15 is 5, and so on. These things to be obtained. So In the same manner, the third row minimum is 10, 10 to be deducted from 10, 10 minus 10 is 0, 13 minus 10 is to be 3, and 11 minus 10 is to be 1, and so on. This is the row reduction. That's the step number 1. So you have to move it in the step number 2 with from this particular table, not from the question, rather from this particular table, you have to move to here. Then from the first table, I mean the first column, which is the minimum, that's 0. 0 it will be deducted from all the things. 5 minus 0, 0 minus 0, 0 minus 0, same thing is there. And in this case, in the second, in case of your, let's say the 10, 5, and 3, 3 is the minimum. Subtract 3 from 10, 5 from 3, and 3 from 3. It becomes 7, 2, and 0. And in this case, the last row, the column minimum is to be 0, and subtract it from all other things. Therefore, the same thing is to be taken into account. This is called the row reduction. This is called the column reductions, right? So that means create the zero opportunity cost by that means repeatedly subtracting the lowest cost from the each row and thereafter from each column. So after knowing the term, what is called the step number 1 and step number 2, the next is to be we have to trace the horizontal and vertical line to cover all the zeros. And how to start with it? Here we can start with this is the first for column containing the two zeros, and this is 1 0 and 1 0. Either we have to take the third row like this way, one line, or in the first row, this is one line, because that line cross the minimum one line that cover two zeros. Because we take into account the minimum number of lines are required in order to cover the maximum zeros. And in that pattern, if you track this one and after that this way and this way, obviously that the minimum minor three lines are required in order to cover all zeros, and which is nothing but the order of the matrix. So therefore, we find the three rows are there. We have to three lines. We take into account. We have to cross this all the three zeros. So we reach our optimal solution, right? So that means after knowing the term of the optimal solution, next question is to be how you have to assigning it. So in order to assign that, let's say this is the last table. From this particular table, what we have to do now? Where the single zero to be taken into account? In which row or which column having single zero? That means this is 1 0. It will be that. In this case, this is 1 0, right? So that means we have to pick this one, and this particular thing is assigned to the job one. That means worker one can be taken into account the fixing the light, right? In the same pattern, I take into account 25 hours. Similarly, this is in the second row. We find second column. We find this is the turn zero to be that. We have to assign this one, then we have to cross this. That means this. That means the airbag can be fixed by the worker three. So worker three must have to take into account the airbag, which take into account the 13 hours. So here is the 25, it is the 13. I mean, it will be 38 hours. The two tasks covered with the 38 hours. Now, once we cross it, only this thing is left. So we will take into account this one. That means 15. That means will are to be fixed by the worker number 3, that is the 15. So what we take 15, 25, 40, 40 plus 13, 53. So the whole task to be over by the 53 hours. Mark it, we move to the next thing. We have to assign in such a way. So it is the 53. The minimum total cost is to be 53, right? So at the end, what we find, we take into the zeros at the original cost table, and those will be minimize the cost of the car limited company and bring the 53 hours to the minimum one in order to assign a different worker to the different tasks of them. Got it? So the type of, I mean, sitters are there with the wheel sitter, airbag sitter, the light sitter, and which particular worker to be assigned which particular, I mean, type of car to maintain it, right? And overall, that take into account 53 amount of hour. It is cost means it is the hour. The cost is written in terms of hours because all are expressed in terms of the hour in the original question. Okay, it is in terms of the hours. So as it will be written in terms of the original hours, so therefore we take the 53 hour to complete the task. Okay. So this is the case to be there. Now, after that, after knowing the term, what is called the scheduling, move to the terms, what is called the sequencing. So before sequencing, are you understand the concept? I to ask you the questions. Are you getting it? Hello? Hello? Are you there? Yes, please.
Yes,
Huh?
Yes,
Are you
sir.
getting?
Yes.
Huh? Are you understand the question in which to solve it? Are you understand the
Yes, sir.
question?
But last step, step number 3, thoda और
Okay,
explain कर दीजिए please.
okay. Actually, the fact is that uh, here row reduction, column reduction is over. We take the minimum from each row, subtracting it. So in the first row, 25 is the minimum. Subtract from it, we find this line. In the second row, minimum is to be 19. Subtract it from 15. Subtract it from the other element in that row. We find this one. In the third row, minimum is to be 10. Subtract it from the others. We find these things. Now from this row, this is called the row reductions. Then in case of the column reductions, we take the minimum of from this particular column. That is a 0. So we have to 0 to be subtracted from here. The same thing is there. And in this case, minimum is 3. Subtract it from this, we find this one. Minimum is 0 in this third column. Therefore, it will remain the same because 0 minus 0, 4 minus 0, 1 minus 0. Right. After this, what you have to take? The next step is to be, you have to draw minimum number of horizontal and vertical line to cover all zeros. Right. So minimum number. What is the order of the matrix? Order of the matrix is 3 by 3. So order of the matrix is 3. Now we can minimally 3 lines are to be traced. You need to cover all zeros. So how you have to trace the 3 line? Only horizontal and vertical, no diagonal lines. So therefore we trace a line like this way, or we can trace like this way, or we can trace like this pattern. Any pattern you can trace the line. Actually here I take into account this pattern and this and this. So how many lines do we take into account? 3 lines are there in order to cover all zeros. So now what do you find? The number of line and the order of the matrix are same. That means we reach our optimum solution. Then after that, from this particular table, once again you have to rewrite this table, mark it here. Once again you have to rewrite this particular table. Now we try to assigning it. But how to assign? The assignment process can be takes place. First, you have to consider in which row or which column having only 1 0, right? So in the first row having 1 0 is this one. You have to pick this one. We have to take this particular as your assigning. That means this light vehicles to be assigned to the worker number 1. Okay. Once you assign, is there any 0? No. If it is there, you have to cross it out. So that means this is fixed. Freeze. The worker 1 can be freeze to the light vehicles. Similarly, is there any other 0? Yes, in the second column, there exists a single 0. As we find the single 0 to be here, then you have to pick this one. That means you have to phrase it. That means the worker 3 to be assigned to this A. That means worker 3 must have to be done the airbag type of car. And once we assign this one, yes, there is a 0, we have to cross it out. We have to cross this 0, right? So only 1 0 to be left. That means that the wheel car to be assigned to the worker 2. Or you can start with this way also. In the second row having only 1 0, you have to assign in this one. If you assign this one, you have to deduct this one. Okay, ultimately 1 left. So this is only one solution. Then after getting this one, from the past matrix, when the original matrix, when the original question, that is the 30, 35, 25, this one. Okay, so once we have to pick this one and you have to mark it. In the worker 1 can handle the light vehicles, and worker 1 handle light vehicles. What is the time period? 25. This 25 is here. Worker 2 working to the wheel vehicles. That means how many time? 15 hours. And the worker 3 to be assigned to the airbag type of car, it to be how many times it take? 13 hours. So 25, 15, and 13. We just add it, then we find yes, it is the only 33 hour to be required into completing the whole task. Now we're getting it. Now we're able to understand.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Then after knowing the term, what is called the assignment, come to the next very, very important part that is called the sequencing. Okay, in the coming class, I have to provide some sort of numericals in front of you. You have to try to solve it. I have to provide you some numerical, you try to solve inside the class so that you can minimize the problem of the assignment as well as the sequencing. Let's start with the sequencing. So here that the different type of sequencings are there. Sequencing means the how you have to make the flow of work. Okay. After which calculate, for example, you know, to printing the book. First we take the manuscript, After getting into account the manuscript, then you have to typing it. After typing, we have to, you have to the printing it. After printing, then after with that stitching it. After stitching, binding, and your labeling and so on. Similarly, if to take into account the tailoring of the dresses are there, first of all we take the measurement, after that cutting, after that your stitching, then bottoming, then pressing, after that labeling and packing and so on. Like this is the sequence. But similarly, suppose you're not cleaning a particular room. First of all, let's say that the 4 to 5 rooms are there, and they have the different size. Then how you have to clean it? What is the sequence of the cleaning? Then first of all, we have to dusting it. After dusting, then we have to washing it. So the dusting and washing, let's say that the two things are the two tasks are there. So which room we have to start first? Then which room we have to take the dusting first? Then after that, that the sweeping is there. Dusting, and there have to be cleaning. So things are there. That is the systematic manner in which we make the sequence. So that is the term what is called the sequencing. Sequencing means the determining the order in which the jobs are to be processed. The order is also required for the work procedures at the individual workstations. If the work centers are heavily loaded, jobs are lengthy, the situations can become a complicated one. So the order of the processing let's say in case of your tailoring, let's say that in a particular day, the coming puja festival, that the 100 200 customer runs and they provide the measurement, but how quickly you have to dispatch the order? It's very difficult, right? So in order to cutting it, let's say the cutting department, they can cut it very easily. Measurement also, they take the measurement and so on, but the stitching and your bottoming and your pressing, and this take into account the huge number of time. So therefore, what you find, to avoid this lengthy process, minimize the time to complete a particular task, we make the sequence. So the order of the processing is vital when it comes to the cost of the waiting to be the process and the cost of the idle time of the work centers. Because let's, for example, suppose you have two machines are there. One mason completed its act. Let's the measurement department that measure it and throw the things to the stitching department. But there the stitching department are very difficult because it takes some time. While they stitch it, the cutting department remain idle. Okay? And during that time period, bottoming department also with the idle. So how you have to assign the things? So that we have to make a proper sequence so all tasks can be over to minimize the idle time. You can understand these things with the help of the different process. Rules are there. And proceeding with the rules, let's start with the first bit. What is called the fast come fast service? The fast in, fast out, like that process. So in the first come fast service basis, here the jobs are the process in the sequence in which they are to be, or appeared, or they enter into the sub. The simplest and the natural way at the sequencing as that mean the queuing in a blank. So suppose you were moving to the bank counter, and in front of that particular counter, who come first, he got to be get the service first. So that means in the fast come fast service, that is the sequence. Second type of sequence is called the shortest processing time. Which task to be wind up quickly, that task must be handled fast. Suppose you have to moving to a particular kirana shop and you have to purchase 1 or 2 items. Another person to be rushed to that particular kirana shop, but he purchased 20 items. Then how to handle the crowd? To minimize, lower down the crowd or the complex situation inside the kirana shop. The kirana owner must have to be dispatch the single persons. Single person means only single items were to be purchased. They have to be dispatched as quick as possible. So that means shortest processing. Who takes less processing time, that work can be take fast. So the jobs at the sequence in the increasing order, that that is the processing time is to be less. The jobs at the shortest processing time is the first, the one in with the next shortest processing time, and so on. That is the sequence we have to make it. Right. Suppose if you're moving to the salon, and inside the salon, let's say those who have to be take into account both cutting the hair and designing it, and there's a black coloring it. So it takes more time. Those have to be, less high hair is there, and only the haircut take into account. It takes less time. both haircut as well the beard to be saved, then in that case also it takes more time. So we have to, at a time, the huge customer to enter into that particular salon, then how the manage the crowd. So on the basis of your shortest processing time, that is the sequence here to be ordering it. It is not the fast come fast serve. Similarly, earliest due date. Earliest due date means suppose you have to reach a particular center and say that yes, I have to provide you the service after 5 days, after 5 minutes, after 10 minutes, after 20 minutes, like that. So whose due date it will be fast, that we serve first. Okay. So that is called the job service sequence increasing order on their due date. Right. So due date means after how many time. Let's for example, you have to moving to a particular, I mean, tailoring shop, and tailor you have to provide the order after, I mean, provide your measurement and so on. Then prepare a bill, and the bill tells us after 20 days you have to be provided to you. Okay, after 20 days. Another customer again 23 days. Another customer 25 days, like that. Suppose with the relative, okay, 12 days. So whose due date it will be fast, that due date must be served first, right? So that is the concept of the earliest due date. Similarly, the latest due date also be that. Critical ratio, we have to take into account the ratio between your processing time and the due date. And where is the minimum ratio that we address first. So that the different techniques are there, and so processing time, earliest due date, shortest processing time, longest processing time, fast come fast service, right? Earlier due date, late due date, slack is there also with there another time things what is called the slack. Okay, that the slack time. Then we can take into account the slack time for operation. The next queue we can take into account the LSU also be latest setup time. Similarly, priority time is there. That the different techniques are there. So those techniques are to be explained with the help of certain numerical examples in the coming class. Similarly, after putting that sequence, we prepare the Gantt chart, and that Gantt chart tells us how systematic jobs are to be taken into account in order to executing a particular task. Okay, so how many time? Suppose a particular, to producing a particular product, it consists of the 5 to 7 tasks are there, and those tasks are to be take the different time period. But how we have to make the tasks and how we have to make the sequence, so to prepare the chart, that the graphical presentations of that sequencing concept is called the Gantt chart. That also we show in the coming class. Okay, so these things are there, and it we wind up right now. In the coming class, we have to start with this sequence. We take some numericals, and with the help of the junctions rules and other rules are there, like a fast come fast, earliest due date, late due date, or the take into account priority time period and so on. We separate example I have to show you, and in which way each examples to be obtain the optimum time, or making the time on the sequence was to minimize the time, minimize the cost to manufacturing a particular product. Okay, so this thing to be covered in the coming class. Okay, so that's all for today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hmm. Sujata Sahu, Kirtiranjan Majhi, Satyavrata